We built the car in 57 days, and we did it. And this is my fastest pass ever. I officially have a 7-second pass, and I think we got to come back and do 6s.
For years, the whispers about Amelia Hartford followed the same script. She didn't really build those cars. The fabrication happened off camera. A team of men handled the engineering while she handled the spotlight. Her rise was too rapid, too cinematic, too improbable to be authentic. They said success in the automotive world doesn't happen like that. Not for a woman teaching herself at weekend garage meets, absorbing knowledge from late-night forum threads, experimenting in rented shop space with scraped-together parts. They insisted there had to be hidden capital, industry gatekeepers quietly opening doors, a safety net the audience couldn't see. But then the numbers started speaking. A 57-day build. A brand new generation Nissan Z pushed to a world record, a 7.75 at 181 miles per hour, the fastest pass she herself had ever made. No editing trick can fabricate elapsed time. No sponsorship narrative can fake trap speed. At 181 miles per hour, physics doesn't care about rumors. It only respects control. And when the rear stepped out at 125 miles per hour in the 60-foot, when the car drifted left and disaster hovered inches away, she corrected it. Instinct, precision, survival. The camera didn't cut. The data logs didn't lie. At 32, Amelia Hartford didn't respond to critics with a statement. She responded with telemetry, time slips, and exposed footage of near-fatal moments where skill was the only barrier between mastery and catastrophe. The Rumours said she couldn't have done it alone. The evidence showed her hands on the wheel when it mattered most. But to understand what that proof truly cost her, you have to start long before the world records, before the boost maps, before the dyno sessions, before the internet scrutiny. You have to start with what she lost. Amelia Hartford was born on July 29, 1993, in Los Angeles. There was no racing lineage embedded in her DNA. No father handing down carburetor tuning secrets in a family garage. No generational mechanic shaping her apprenticeship. No inherited shop, no trust fund, no insider roadmap into a notoriously closed industry. What she did have was curiosity, obsession, a willingness to ask questions in rooms where she was often the only woman present. And at 15, everything shifted. Her father died by suicide. Not rumor, not speculation. Fact. At an age when most teenagers are worried about school dances and driver's permits, Amelia was navigating grief that fractures identity. The kind of loss that forces you to grow up overnight. The kind that rewires your understanding of stability and permanence. Grief doesn't show up in highlight reels. It doesn't trend on automotive YouTube, but it shapes resilience in ways no sponsorship ever could. That loss carved something into her. An urgency, a refusal to waste time, a drive that didn't come from ego but from survival. When you've already experienced the worst kind of permanence, risk looks different. Fear recalibrates. The Rumours framed her ascent as polished and convenient. What they missed was that behind every build was someone who learned to endure long before she ever learned to tune a turbocharged engine. The sacrifices weren't manufactured. The struggles weren't scripted. They were forged quietly years before the cameras arrived. And when people ask how someone builds a world record car in 57 days, they're really asking how someone develops that level of discipline, focus, and tolerance for pressure. The answer doesn't start in a shop. It starts with loss. This part of her story isn't whispered speculation. Amelia has spoken about it plainly. On podcasts, in interviews, across her own platforms. She has never treated it as a secret or a dramatic twist meant for sympathy. It's simply the truth. Her father was involved in a severe motorcycle accident that left the entire left side of his body paralyzed. The physical damage was catastrophic. The emotional and psychological aftermath was harder to see but just as devastating. Losing mobility changes a person. Losing independence can fracture identity. He struggled deeply in the years that followed, and eventually the weight of it became unbearable. When Amelia was 15, her father died by suicide. In the aftermath, her family made a decision that felt both necessary and disorienting. They left California and relocated to Bloomington, Indiana, to be closer to her mother's family. A new state, a new school, a new life forced into existence while grief was still raw and unprocessed. She was a teenager navigating a kind of loss most people will never fully comprehend. There's no roadmap for that. No clean transition, just an emptiness that follows you everywhere. What she found, almost accidentally, was a steering wheel. At 16, she got her driver's license. Instead of holding tightly to the conventional path she had once imagined, she took the money she had been saving for college and bought her first car, a 2005 Infiniti G35. She chose it for a practical reason. Online forums insisted that if you truly wanted to learn car control, you needed rear-wheel drive and a manual transmission. That's how you understood weight transfer. That's how you learned throttle modulation. That's how you felt the machine instead of just driving it. There was just one problem. She didn't know how to drive manual. On the drive home after buying it, she smoked the clutch. She has told that story with a laugh, an almost self-deprecating grin, describing herself grinding gears and stalling at intersections. But beneath the humor was something far heavier. A grieving teenager alone in a car she could barely operate, forcing herself to learn in real time because there was no one else to teach her. No father in the passenger seat, no guiding hand, no safety net, just repetition, stall, restart, try again. She later described getting her license as freedom, not in the cliché teenage sense, but as a lifeline. The car gave her something grief couldn't strip away: motion, agency, direction. Even if she didn't know where she was going, she could go. In Bloomington, she discovered a local community called BC Crew, named after the city. These weren't sponsored builders or social media personalities. They were enthusiasts, young people who met weekly, worked on their own cars, shared tools, and passed knowledge hand-to-hand in dimly lit garages while other teenagers went to parties. One member, nicknamed BCH, became a quiet mentor figure. He and others in the crew taught her fundamentals: how to swap turbos, how to diagnose mechanical issues, how to approach modifications methodically instead of impulsively. It wasn't polished instruction. It was hands-on, trial-by-fire learning. Scraped knuckles, late nights, borrowed tools. She has called that group her found family. After losing her father, the automotive community gave her something structure couldn't: belonging. People who showed up. People who cared about what she was building instead of what she had lost. In a season of life defined by absence, the garage was full of presents. She enrolled in an auto mechanic program to formalize her education. She studied engine systems, transmissions, suspension geometry. She learned the vocabulary of torque specs and compression ratios in a classroom setting. But she realized something important. She didn't learn best from textbooks. She learned from doing. After a couple of years, she made the unconventional decision to drop out. Not because she lacked discipline, but because the garage had already become her real curriculum. Real engines, real mistakes, real consequences. She once said she felt like she owed her life to the car community, that without them she might not have found purpose or people who genuinely cared about her during the darkest chapter of her life. That statement isn't hyperbole. For Amelia, the automotive world wasn't a hobby that turned into a career. It was stabilization after trauma. It was the place where grief translated into motion instead of paralysis. Long before the world records, before the 7-second passes and 180-plus MPH trap speeds, before the accusations and the skepticism, there was a 16-year-old in a stalled Infiniti, clutch burning, refusing to quit. That's where the real story begins. At 18, she moved back to Los Angeles carrying 3 things: hard-earned mechanical knowledge, the beginnings of real skill, and no financial cushion whatsoever. She knew how to swap a turbocharger without turning it into a disaster. She could diagnose a misfire instead of throwing parts at it blindly. She understood the difference between advice that sounds convincing on a forum and what actually works when your hands are buried in an engine bay. But knowing how to build a car and knowing how to build a career are 2 entirely different engineering problems. Los Angeles didn't care what she had learned in Bloomington. It didn't care that she could wire a boost controller or troubleshoot a failing fuel system. The city was saturated with ambition. Thousands of people just like her, talented, determined, unknown, all trying to carve out space in industries that reward visibility as much as skill. And the visibility hadn't come yet. These were the years nobody highlights in a montage, before the world records, before the sponsorships, before the 7-second passes. She was a waitress. The years between 18 and her mid-20s were defined by grind, multiple jobs, split focus, chronic exhaustion, the kind that settles into your bones when you're chasing two dreams simultaneously, and neither one is paying the bills. She worked in restaurants, clearing tables, taking orders, smiling through long shifts. Earlier, she had worked at Pikes in Indiana, picking up ski resort shifts wherever she could fit them in. She continued to pursue acting, taking small roles and background work. Her acting career had technically begun in 2009 with minor appearances in films like From Mexico with Love and Nightfall, but Hollywood doesn't compensate you for persistence. It pays you sporadically, if at all. Rent was consistent. Income was not. What most people underestimate about this period is how physically demanding it was. Learning high-level car modification without resources isn't glamorous. It means limited tools, no professional lift, no climate-controlled shop, no experienced technician standing over your shoulder correcting mistakes. Every error costs money you don't have. Every success introduces a new problem you haven't yet solved. After full shifts on her feet, she would go home and work on cars. Not in a pristine performance shop, just in whatever space she could secure. On the ground, under jack stands, in cramped garages, learning by breaking things and then forcing herself to understand why they broke. She stayed up late reading forums and technical threads, trying to decipher why a system wasn't functioning as expected. 8 hours later, she'd be back at the restaurant. During this period, she built an LS-swapped Nissan 240 SX, a project that would later become central to her early YouTube content. An LS swap isn't cosmetic work. It's a complex integration challenge: engine mounts, transmission compatibility, wiring harness adaptation, ECU configuration, fuel system upgrades, cooling solutions. It requires patience and problem-solving under constraint. Before it was content, it was simply a car she was trying to make run, funded by tip money and whatever she could scrape together between paychecks. There were no viral thumbnails, no cinematic edits, just trial, error, and incremental progress. Then, in 2017, something shifted. Her Instagram posts documenting her builds began gaining traction. The work was authentic, technical, and hands-on. That visibility caught the attention of Michelin, which invited her to New York for the launch of the Pilot Sport 4S Performance tire. That event mattered for reasons beyond branding. It exposed her to established car-build content creators, people who weren't just building cars, but documenting the process strategically. They understood framing, storytelling, audience engagement. Until that moment, her builds were private battles. Now she saw the blueprint for amplification. She bought her first camera. That purchase wasn't symbolic, it was tactical. A pivot from purely mechanical craft to media strategy. She wasn't just going to build cars. She was going to document them, explain them, and put her hands visibly on every component. The same discipline that had kept her in the garage after 12-hour shifts now transferred to content creation. Learning editing software the same way she learned fuel mapping, by trial, repetition, and relentless iteration. There was still no safety net, no guaranteed outcome, no promise it would work. But this time, the garage wasn't just a refuge. It was becoming a platform. On January 18, 2017, she launched her YouTube channel. There was no production team, no strategy deck, no guarantee of traction, just a camera, a car, and the decision to document the process. She began vlogging herself working on builds, explaining modifications, sharing both progress and setbacks. What followed was not overnight virality. It was discipline. 3 videos a week, every week, no matter what. This is the point where observers tend to assume the narrative shifts upward. Platform secured, audience growing, problem solved. It wasn't that simple. Early uploads drew attention. And with attention came scrutiny. In a male-dominated automotive space, a woman documenting hands-on mechanical work disrupted expectations. The comments were not technical critiques. They were personal, hostile, dismissive. She later explained on the Car Stories podcast, which she now co-hosts with Fast and Furious actor Sung Kang, that by the 3rd and 4th videos the backlash had intensified to the point where she considered quitting altogether. The accusations followed a predictable pattern. She must not be doing the work herself. Someone off camera must be building the cars. She was just a face, a placeholder, a marketing angle. The assumption wasn't subtle. It was categorical. A woman couldn't possibly be executing complex mechanical builds independently. Instead of retreating, she responded with documentation. She filmed the LS swap 246 from failure to completion. She left in the mistakes. When components failed, viewers saw the failure. When she didn't know how to fix something, she showed the process of figuring it out, wiring diagrams open, parts scattered, trial and error unfolding in real time. Authenticity became her counter-argument. The restaurant shifts didn't disappear because subscribers increased. Monetization was inconsistent, sponsorships were not immediate. For years she lived in the overlap between two unstable career tracks, automotive content and acting, neither fully supporting her yet. She kept uploading anyway, operating on the assumption that sustained output would eventually convert to opportunity. In 2018 she appeared on Season 2 of Netflix's Fastest Car, a competition series centered on high-performance builds. It marked her first significant exposure to a mainstream audience. The visibility accelerated channel growth. New collaborations emerged. The grind began to produce measurable returns. By 2020, she was working on one of her most ambitious builds, a twin-turbo C8 Corvette project with the explicit goal of becoming the fastest in the world. Then, in July 2019, everything shifted again. Her brother Ryan died by suicide. The same kind of loss that had defined her adolescence now resurfaced in adulthood. Two immediate family members, same cause. She has spoken about this openly. Neither her father's death nor her brother's was concealed or softened for public comfort. But after July 2019, the emotional foundation beneath her career changed. Before her brother's death, much of her drive was rooted in proof. Proof that she belonged, proof that she was capable, proof that the skepticism was unfounded. Afterward, the motivation expanded beyond validation. The stakes became personal in a different way. In 2020, she launched Return to Life. Structurally, it is an apparel line and car care brand. Functionally, it is a mental health initiative. A percentage of proceeds supports nonprofit organizations focused on prevention and access to mental health resources, including the Alive and Well Foundation and Project Healthy Minds. She has framed the initiative around prevention rather than reaction, addressing support systems before crisis escalates. Publicly, she has cited the broader statistics, hundreds of thousands of suicide deaths in the past decade. For her, the issue is not abstract. It is lived experience. She joined the board of directors of the Alive and Well Foundation, formalizing her involvement beyond symbolic advocacy. In interviews, including one with Authority magazine, she has been direct. Mental health is not a side topic. It has shaped her life. She has experienced its impact personally and through those closest to her. This is where the narrative becomes more complex than internet personality builds fast cars. After 2019, every record attempt, every high-risk pass at triple-digit speeds, every ambitious mechanical undertaking existed alongside a parallel mission. Not just to prove competence in a competitive industry, but to leverage visibility toward prevention and support. The channel continued to grow. The builds became faster, the records more aggressive. But the ground beneath all of it had changed. What had once been about belonging had become about purpose. The woman who had once found survival in speed was now building something meant to help others survive. And she never stopped building cars. The next major chapter centered around her C8 Corvette, a car she named Phoenix. The symbolism wasn't subtle: rebirth, fire, return. When she first bought the C8, she publicly stated she intended to keep it mostly stock, maybe wheels, maybe an exhaust. Nothing extreme. That restraint didn't last. By early 2021, Phoenix had undergone a full transformation. The build escalated far beyond cosmetic upgrades. Twin precision 6,466 turbochargers, internal engine modifications by Texas Speed, a Holly Dominator ECU to properly manage fueling, boost and bypass factory electronic torque safeguards. On the dyno, the car produced 1,022 horsepower at the rear wheels, a staggering figure for a C8 at the time. It was enough to claim a dyno-based world record. But she wasn't chasing a dyno sheet, she wanted a time slip. In March 2021, she took Phoenix to Formosa Raceway. The standing quarter-mile record for a C8 Corvette was 9.95 seconds, held by Extreme Turbo Systems. Her first serious pass, 9.98 seconds. Into the nines. Record broken. The team was ready to celebrate. She stopped them. The air was cooling. Conditions were improving. There was more in the car. Next pass, 9.47 seconds at 144.75 miles per hour. Final pass of the day, 9.41 seconds. Final pass of the day. She returned and ran a 9.36 at 147 miles per hour, breaking her own record. Development setbacks, mechanical failures, tuning revisions. At one point, Phoenix caught fire after an oil line scraped curbing at Buttonwillow Raceway. She didn't edit that out. She showed it. Time slips became her rebuttal to every accusation. Then came the Nissan Z. In December 2024, she unveiled a 57-day build that sounded implausible even by her standards. The foundation, a fully built VR38 engine sourced from a GTR Nismo. Twin Zoner turbos, supporting modifications and fabrication executed under an aggressive timeline. On the dyno, the car produced 1,999 wheel horsepower, effectively a 2,000 horsepower street-based platform. The existing quarter-mile record for a new generation Nissan Z hovered around 9.9 seconds. At Formosa, on her record attempt, the launch was violent, the car hooked, first gear. The front end lifted, second gear, and then instability. At over 180 miles per hour, the rear stepped out. The car yawed off-center. Tires spinning, the wall approaching. At that speed, there's no time for analysis, only reaction. She deployed the parachute, counter-steered, and relied on years of car control. Drifting experience, high-speed stability corrections, instinct under pressure. It was not a staged moment. It was survival compressed into fractions of a second. Minutes later, she lined up again. The next pass, 7.75 seconds at 181.85 miles per hour. Nearly 2 seconds faster than the previous record. The fastest new generation Nissan Z in the world. Every record after 2019 carried different weight. Before, speed was proof of competence. After losing her brother, speed became something else, a way to metabolize grief. Motion as defiance, acceleration as affirmation. She wasn't just chasing numbers. She was demonstrating that she was still here, still building, still pushing forward when the alternative would have been to stop. The rumors said she couldn't have done it herself. Time slips, telemetry, and 180 MPH corrections say otherwise. What came after the records was not a slowdown. It was expansion. In 2023, she appeared in Gran Turismo, a Sony Pictures production inspired by the real-life Racing Academy program. Starring alongside Orlando Bloom and David Harbour, the film opened at #1 at the box office. For someone who had once taken background acting gigs to pay rent, it marked a full-circle moment, but this time anchored in credibility, earned outside Hollywood. In early 2025, she won the Formula Evo sessions, earning Grand Champion after training under world champion Stoffel von Dorn. Months later, she made her professional racing debut at the Pikes Peak International Hill Climb, one of the most technically demanding motorsport events in the world. She qualified on pole and finished second in class, an outcome that would be impressive for any rookie driver, let alone someone who built her foundation outside traditional racing pipelines. She now co-hosts the Car Stories podcast, continuing conversations with drivers, builders, and industry figures. She partners with major automotive brands including Chevrolet, Nissan, Mobil 1, and Michelin. None of it was handed to her. At 32 years old, Amelia Hartford has effectively confirmed every rumor, just not in the way critics intended. Yes, she taught herself. She started with a smoked clutch in an Infiniti G35, grinding gears on the drive home because there was no one in the passenger seat to guide her. She learned from forums, from weekend garage sessions, from trial and error. Yes, she fought for legitimacy. Years of restaurant shifts. Years of brutal comment sections questioning whether she belonged. Years of assumptions that someone else must be doing the real work. Yes, the sacrifices were real, not the aesthetic kind, the kind that reshapes a life. Losing her father at 15. Losing her brother a decade later to the same tragedy. Yes, the polished public image hides pressure. She has spoken openly about depression and anxiety. She has acknowledged that success does not immunize someone from internal battles. Instead of concealing that reality, she built Return to Life, A brand structured to fund prevention-focused mental health organizations and increase access to support before crisis becomes fatal. The Rumours always asked whether she earned it. What they missed is that earning it was never the core objective. Surviving was. A teenager who lost her father to suicide found motion in a car. A young woman who lost her brother to the same darkness chose acceleration instead of paralysis. She turned grief into horsepower. She turned pain into measurable outcomes, elapsed times, trap speeds, records. She built world record cars not primarily to silence doubters, but because building was the language she understood when everything else felt untranslatable. Picture her alone in a garage late at night, hands cut and grease-stained, the smell of fuel and solvent in the air, a half-finished project on jack stands. Not glamorous, not cinematic. Just incremental progress, a car closer to running than it was yesterday, not because she has something left to prove, because this is how she processes loss. This is how she honors what she cannot change. This is how she stays. At 32, Amelia Hartford confirmed the Rumours. She did teach herself. She did endure the grind. She did survive what breaks many people. And she is still building.